The inner critic has an effect, quite a noticeable effect in many areas of your life. I dare to say in all areas of your life. In this video, we are going to look at how inner critic affects romantic relationships and how becoming more aware of the ways you may have underestimated the role of the inner critic in how certain things play out in your romantic relationship could actually make you, you know, prone to heal this relationship with the inner critic and then with your partner. So I have personally found out about my inner critic in 1992, and since we had a lot of adventure and I've learned a lot of things. So I hope that what I've learned can be useful for you to improve your relationship with your inner critic and with your partner. So the first of 5 ways that I've seen the inner critic interferes with our relationship is when our partner says something that triggers a painful emotion, and we allow the inner critic to give an interpretation and to kind of become a filter for what we believe that message from our partner means. So the partner say, you suggest, shall we do this together? And the partner says, no, I don't want to. And you get triggered, you feel a bit rejected, a bit sad, a bit put aside, a bit rejected. And the critic take that message, take that pain and say, you see, she's rejecting you. She's about to leave you, or she really doesn't like you anymore. And she's criticizing you, whatever. But if you don't talk to your partner, you realize that that's not what the partner was saying. It's not what the partner was meaning. So when you find yourself in this situation where there is a disconnect between what one means in this communication and what the other understands, so there is this kind of little things that get often misunderstood. There could be the inner critic that assign a meaning to what your partner says, and you believe the inner critic instead of asking question to your partner about, is that what you meant? Am I being rejected? Or don't you like anymore to do these things with me? So the antidote here is to ask questions. The second way is when you manage that trusting your partner doesn't come easy, doesn't come spontaneous, that if your partner says something or does something, that your first reaction, your kind of instinctive reaction is not to trust. And it is easy, really easy for you to doubt, to feel not trustworthy, let's say. And also here, what happens is that you could say that probably experiences from the past where the inner critic has learned that people are not always to be trusted has created this filter, this barrier where it is more difficult for you to trust. And even someone you are in a relationship with, maybe your spouse, still it is not, the trust is not automatic. You may feel you trust them, but there are ways that they can trigger you out of trusting them. And that's because the critic helps you out. They say, are you sure you can trust your partner in this situation? I have some doubts, you should have too. So be really careful. It's not always the case. I mean, the same way as when the critic could be right. There could be something not to be trusted. But the antidote here, as in the first case, is asking questions, going deeper. So instead of having a communication, a conversation with the inner critic, reverse back to your partner and have a communication with your partner about the situation. Eventually also to check your doubts, but be also mindful that there could be an inner critic that automatically put that kind of doubt in your mind about if your partner is trustworthy. So the trick here is to be able to separate, to be able, if there are some partners that are not trustworthy, but are you really sure that's the case? The reason why this is so important is because if your partner is trustworthy, and it's just the influence of your inner critic that makes you doubt that, you are damaging your relationship because of the inner critic. That's the real reason. You need to be able to make this distinction. So, and to do that, you need really to communicate with your partner. The inner critic is not able to give you that answer. The third way that the inner critic can interfere with your relationship is when things happen. So in this case, there is not even a conversation. There is not per se a verbal communication from your partner towards you. There are just situations. And the inner critic takes in on itself to give an interpretation, and it's pretty sure that's the right interpretation. Like, you don't even need to ask to check with your partner. That's the only meaning that situation can have. Imagine, for instance, I see really often partners that come from two different countries, so they have two different culture, and then they go in social situation, and the way the one behaves registers as really, really off for the other. So the behavior of the first one doesn't register by the maybe social rule of the culture of the second partner. So the inner critic say, I know your culture, I know you, I know this is just not normal. This is not the way a good partner behaves. So there's not even a question from the second part to say, hey, what's going on? I don't like when these things happen. I would like us to be present in a different way. No, there is an interpretation, and there is like, you feel offended, you feel disrespected maybe, and you just don't enter in a conversation. You just react as someone that has been wronged. You can understand that if that's not what the first partner meant, if it's something that is purely done because there is a difference of culture or a difference of personality, or maybe the first partner is a friend with everybody already and the second not, missing the chance to talk about it and to be open about it. So this is how I feel, and this is what I would like, so that the other partner can say, oh, really, I didn't realize you felt like that. Let's see how we can do it differently. If you miss the chance to have that conversation, you're really giving your relationship in the hand of the inner critic. And as I said in another video, the inner critic is not capable of intimate relationship, of emotional intimacy. So it's a bit of a dangerous terrain. The fourth way, and that's connected to what I just said, the first way the inner critic interferes with our romantic relationship is when it comes to vulnerability. Vulnerability is a cornerstone to have an intimate relationship, but is also kryptonite for the inner critic. So when you are in a vulnerable situation, the inner critic does not know how to handle it. So there is discomfort. So if you are touching your vulnerability in a negative way, where the inner critic feels that it needs to protect you, the inner critic cannot protect you unless he separates you from the relationship, unless he can help you close off, but he cannot help you enter in an emotionally intimate and safe dialogue with your partner. So be really mindful of the things that go through your head. If you find yourself in a vulnerable situation with your partner, you may have your inner critic suggesting things that can maybe protect you but are not going to help you move forward in your relationship. So when vulnerability is involved, make sure you know your inner critic well enough to be able to ask the inner critic to sit somewhere else for a second as you go about engaging with this vulnerability with your partner. And this has a lot to do with what I was saying about the third point, about how intimate relationships are difficult for the inner critic. The fifth way that the inner critic can interfere with your romantic relationship is when your view of the relationship, what you need from the relationship, is really different from the vision your inner critic has of relationship. The inner critic view of the relationship can be outdated, but it's probably geared to keep you safe emotionally, but in a so safe that you need to disconnect to stay so safe. So when there is a problem, don't talk about it, because you don't know which kind of emotional kind of worm you may be opening. And just stick to what you know needs to be done and needs to be said. And that means also not to grow, not to move towards more safety and intimacy in the relationship. So the view that the inner critic has of the relationship, the suggestion that the inner critic gives you in with regards to what's appropriate to do in a relationship, can be really misleading. I would say that the antidote here is realizing that if you have a relationship with your partner, you and your partner are the only two that can decide what that relationship is about. You and your partner are the one that are going to create the vision for your relationship. And your inner critic is something that you have and that you want to probably learn to live with and have a new, better, healthier relationship with. But be careful not to let it become a relationship between you, the inner critic, and your partner. That's never going to be a really happy relationship. So these are the ways that the inner critic, in my experience, can affect romantic relationships. The antidote is always asking questions, engaging in conversation with your partner, and realizing that what comes from the inner critic is from the inner critic and it's not truth. It's an opinion, it's an information. Sometimes there is something you may want to look more into, but the relationship is with your partner. So you and your partner are ultimately responsible. And it's also, it doesn't work in a way that your inner critic can relieve you of the responsibility of engaging with your partner. If there are insecurity with regards to getting more intimate, more involved, more engaged, that it's all okay, can be worked on, and it can be also be under the influence of the inner critic. But be mindful, don't let the inner critic interfere too much with your relationship. I will put in the description some link to other video about the inner critic that you may find interesting, about how the inner critic talks and what are the ways you can handle it. If you have any question or comment, there is space below the video to do so. Thank you, and until the next time.